Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the if statement as well as the if is error statement. And so the if is error statement prevents the unsightly error messages that we saw just a few minutes ago in that Excel sheet. Remember, if we ask a VLOOKUP function to find a certain value, and either we leave that value blank or that value is not found in the referenced table, you'll get a #NA error in that example. So the if is error function will help you to prevent those errors and actually describe to the end user the situation if it either can't find a value or there's no value listed to find in the VLOOKUP function. So remember this table, we had the #NAs. It's going to clean up that output and make it a lot clearer to the end user. So here's how it works. And so I'm going to describe to you the if function in the actual demo and then move on to the if is error function. But in this case, let's go ahead and just preview the if is error function, and I'm sure it will become a lot clearer when I go through the actual demonstration. Okay, so the if is error function works like this. You start off with if, an open parentheses, is error, and then the function. So in this case, that would be the VLOOKUP function that we had before. We would put that function in the parentheses here. And so what it's saying is if that function results in an error, so if it results in the #NA, whatever it's trying to do, then instead of just showing this error function or these error codes, do something else. So in this case, we can put value not found, for example, and then it wouldn't do the #NA, right? And then if there is no error, so if there's an error, then do this, but if there isn't an error, then do something else. And so what we can do in this case is put that VLOOKUP function right here. So what it's doing is if there's an error, we say value not found. If there is no error, then go ahead and do the function we wanted to do in the first place. And that's basically what we're trying to do here in this equation. And so let's go ahead and go through the actual Excel demonstration, and I'm pretty confident it's going to be a lot clearer for you when we do that. So let's go ahead and do the demo at this time. Okay, so for this demo, be sure to click on the tab that says Scorecard Report If Is Error. So go ahead and click on that. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk through the formulas here. And what I'll do first of all is to just replicate what we just went over a few moments ago. So I'm going to actually copy this formula into the appropriate cell in our reference table. So let's go ahead and put it in this cell. And remember, we are referencing this data table here. We set all these cells to the same formula, and now because it's referencing this, you'll notice here the formula, it's referencing M2, we're getting the city and state because this is column 4 on this subset of the table, right? And so remember, we had these errors. So one way to get rid of an error is to, for example, when there's a blank here, we want it to do something, right? Not just give an error. And so for blanks, you treat a little bit differently. It's an if statement. And so although it's an error, I think blanks are kind of in a different category in a sense that although it gives an error code, it's not really recognized as a quote-unquote error, like say I'm trying to look up a value that's not in the table. But let's just consider it an error for this discussion. So to get rid of this error, you'll want to do an if statement. And I think it's good to explain this because the if statement is a general format here that is used elsewhere in other aspects of Excel. But then you also have to use this statement a little bit more detailed to do the is error function. So let's go ahead and do an if statement first. And in this case, the way it works is it's if, and there's an open parentheses, if there's a condition that happens. So in this case, if I am in this cell, which is I4, and H4 is blank, in this case it's not, but if it was, then I would say just put a blank cell in this cell here with the equation in it, right? So if H4 is blank, then just keep this cell blank here, I4 blank. If it's not blank, then look up the VLOOKUP function. Remember, we're looking up H4, which is AV1462. We're going to look it up in this table here, which is A4 to F15. Look up AV1462 within that table, and then index over to the number of columns that is in cell M2, which is right here. So in this case it's 4, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We get Kaufman, Texas, and sure enough that's what's in this cell, right? Doesn't really get interesting or use the this first part here. If H4 is blank, then put a blank cell until we get to a point when we copy this equation down, and we'll get to situations where there are blank cells. So in order to do that, we can go ahead and copy the equation. So right here, this is the standard equation. Let's put in this alternate equation in that cell. So we'll go ahead and copy this. We'll copy, and we'll put it into this cell here, and we'll go ahead and paste that in there. Oops. Back it up. Let's go ahead and just paste it in this way. There we go. So now we're pasting in the actual formula, and it just doesn't, you know, before it copied this entire format, not too great in here. So we're just going to copy the formula into that window, and we hit. Well, we got to be careful. We have to put in the equal sign. Remember, formulas always have to have equal signs. And we hit enter, and there we go. It still says Kaufman, Texas, because of course there is AV1462 in that cell. But if I go ahead and copy this cell, and then I paste it into the rest of the cells, now we'll see that, okay, if it's blank, it doesn't give me that pound NA anymore. It gives me a blank, which is exactly what this here is doing, right? So now it's giving a blank instead of that ugly hash NA. But there's one more problem here, because now if the cell is not blank, but it can't find that unique ID in the table, remember AV9999 is not in this table, then it returns an error because it doesn't know what to do, but we need to tell it what to do. So in this case, we can append to this formula. So remember I said if H4, so if I'm talking about, if I'm going to put the equation into this cell now, if H4 equals blank, then return a blank cell, and then if it's not blank, then if there's an error when I use the VLOOKUP function, then put in not found, right? So that's, I'm specifically telling it if there's an error, if it can't find, for example, 9999, if that formula is here, I'm going to return not found. If there is no error, then continue with that VLOOKUP function. So if I go ahead and copy this, I'll copy this right here, and I'll copy that, and I'll go ahead and go to this part, and I will paste that in here, right? So now there's the formula. I hit return. Oh, you know, remember, I have to put the equal sign. There we go. And now that formula is in there. In this case, it doesn't really make a difference because it did find 1462, AV1462 in this table. But if I go ahead and copy that formula all the way down, and I paste, now what happens? Okay, in this situation, I'm saying if H8, which is this cell, is blank, then return a blank. Well, it's not blank, so it goes to the next part of the equation. If when it does a VLOOKUP using H8, which is AV9999, it looks in this table. Remember, we defined this table. If it looks for AV9999 and it can't find it, then what do you want me to do? Well, put in not found, which is exactly what it did. If it is not an error, then go ahead and continue with the VLOOKUP function. And that's exactly what happens, say, in this situation, where this cell here, H6, it's not blank, so it doesn't worry about this part. It's not an error because it does find AV1485, right? Where is it? Well, it's right here, right? The last row. It finds it, so it's not an error. So then what does it do? It continues with that VLOOKUP function and then returns the correct value in column number 4, after AB 1485 is found, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and puts in Center Valley, Pennsylvania. Okay, so that's how the ISERROR function works, and also the if function. So as you can see, it really cleans up the data and allows you to get into a format that it doesn't have all these error codes, which might confuse the end user. Okay,